In this video, I'm going to give you an update on the real estate market in Metro Atlanta. Right off the bat, one of the first things that we should know is that many of the headlines that we've been seeing lately in the news and in many of the media sources have been very sensationalized. Lots of people have been using the words like collapse or housing market crash or that the sales prices are going to implode. And those kinds of headlines, I think we need to remember, are not really very specific. Yes, housing prices and average sold prices are going down, as they have been for quite a few months now, but they are not collapsing. We're not really seeing like a housing market crash. So I think it's really important that we take a look at the specific numbers to see how the housing market has been doing and not really rely on these super insane articles and headlines that we've been seeing lately. This kind of insane titles that are really just clickbait are not very helpful. What we really need to know is like what percentage are the home prices going down? Those are the kinds of specific numbers that we need to take a look at to really understand how the housing market has been doing in Metro Atlanta. So let's take a look at those specific numbers. Make sure to stay to the end of the video because I have something I want to give you. Let's take a look at the average number of days that a home is on the market before going under contract. This number really gives us a good understanding of how much competition there is among the buyers who are looking to buy a home. For example, last year when the market was super crazy, like in 2021, there was lots of competition, lots of buyers trying to buy a home, and the average days on market was super low, 2 or even 3 days. The lower that days on market is, the more competition that is indicated. So as days on market are increasing, it's starting to tell us that there's less and less competition. In September of this year, the average days on market for listing was 14 days, and then October, also 14 days. Last year in November, the average days on market was 18 days. So we can certainly see that the average days on market is increasing in Metro Atlanta. There is obviously less and less competition among buyers in Metro Atlanta. And this is pretty commonly understood, I think, with how interest rates have been going up. Because interest rates are going up, there are less people who are able to afford a mortgage. And so this means that there is less competition. I had quite a few people in the last market update video in the comment section asking me to kind of break these numbers down by the different areas of Metro Atlanta. So let's talk about that. For Cobb County, the average days on market was 13 days in September, and then in October, 14 days, and then last month, 15 days. So again, we're seeing even in Cobb County, that number is increasing slowly, a little more slowly in Cobb County. So we're seeing a little less competition in Cobb County. Let's take a look at Fulton County. The average days on market in Fulton County was 13 days in September, 11 days in October, and 17 days last month. And then in Gwinnett County, the average days on market was 16 days in September, 17 days in October, and 21 days last month in November. So we're kind of seeing a similar pattern throughout the different suburbs of Metro Atlanta. Gwinnett County, though, 21 days average days on market. Historically, Gwinnett has been always a very popular place to live, a lot of demand and a lot of competition for people wanting to live in Gwinnett County. This would be cities like Duluth or Suwanee, Beaufort, Norcross. So there really has always been a lot of competition there. And what we're seeing is that there's significantly less competition in Gwinnett County than in Metro Atlanta as a whole. Let's take a look at the average sales price of the homes in Metro Atlanta. Of course, if you're thinking about moving to Atlanta or you just want to know what it's like to live here, feel free to call or text anytime. I'm more than happy to help. Thank you so much to everyone who has reached out. My favorite thing to do in the world is help people get acquainted with my hometown. So let's take a look at the average sales price here in Metro Atlanta. In September of this year, the average sales price was about $414,000. And then in October, the average sales price went down to about $400,000. And last month in November, the average sales price dropped to 396,000. So while we are seeing average sales prices going down in Metro Atlanta, it's not going down as quickly as it has been throughout the year. For example, in June of this year, the average sales price was 440. So there was a big drop, kind of like in the middle of the year, there was a big drop in sales prices, but now that drop is slowing down. And then in certain parts of Georgia, we're actually seeing that number stabilize. Let's take a look at the average sales price in Cobb County. In Cobb County, the average sales price in September was 478, and then in October, it was 486, and in November, back down to 476. So super interesting there. Cobb County is one of the few counties that has kind of had a bit of a back and forth in the past few months in average sales price. It's possible that we may be seeing a stabilizing of the sales prices in Cobb County. Let's talk about the average sales price in Fulton County. Fulton is where you would find cities like Atlanta, also Alpharetta, Roswell, Sandy Springs. In Fulton County, the average sales price in September of this year was 620,000. October was 644,000. And in November, it was 665,000. So super crazy in that pocket of Georgia. We're actually starting to see sales prices go up a small amount. Now, that is very interesting and certainly something that we'll kind of keep our eye on and see how that progresses through the rest of the year. But it is very surprising. So again, we may be seeing a stabilizing of the sales prices here in Georgia. And then in Gwinnett County, the average sales price in September was 469,000. In October, it was 442,000. And in November, last month, it was 430,000. Probably the biggest factor that really determines all of these numbers and how the housing market is doing really in any part of the country is interest rates. Let's take a look at the interest rates and how they have affected the housing market in the last few months. Remember that back in March of this year, interest rates got as low as 3, maybe 3.5%. And since then, we've had a dramatic increase in interest rates, which is one of the things that's slowing down the housing market. In September, the interest rates got up to about 7.0. And then in October, we saw interest rates peak at about 7.6%. But last month, interest rates for the first time in 6 or 7 months went down to about 6.6%. So again, more indication that some of this craziness in the housing market is starting to stabilize. Interest rates going down to 6.6% is huge news, especially for anybody who is considering buying a home in the near future. Okay, now let's look at the percentage of the sold price compared to the list price. This is really one of the best factors for determining which direction the housing market is going. With this number, what we're looking at is what the average list price was of a home and what that home sold for. So back in 2021, when the housing market was crazy, for example, the average sold price was well over the list price. Many times people would list their homes at, say, 500,000, and while the list price was 500,000, the sold price would be as high as 600,000. It was very common for people who were selling their home to receive offers well over the list price. Today, that's less common, but we can kind of see what the percentage is. Are we seeing the sold price far below the list price? Are we seeing the sold price even with the list price? This really kind of gives us a good idea of which direction the housing market is headed. For all of Metro Atlanta, the average home got 99.2% of its list price. So it sold for 99% of its list price. And then in October, it was 98%. So we kind of saw a bit of a decrease in October from 99% to 98%. But what's super interesting is that just last month in November, we saw the average home get 101% of its list price. So if the home was listed at 500,000, last month in November, it got about 502 or 503,000. And this is a big change from the average for the last few months. I think the reason we're kind of seeing that swing is that many sellers have started to realize that the housing market has shifted. And so, whereas in the beginning of this year and in the middle of this year, sellers didn't really realize that the market had shifted yet and were still listing their homes very high, now sellers are realizing that they can't list their homes high because listing your home too high of a price will inevitably make your home sit on the market for a long time. So now we're starting to see sellers list their price at a more reasonable price. This is, I believe, the reason why we're seeing the average sold price to list price be a little more reasonable. So while the housing market is certainly slowing down, we're not having a housing crash. We're not seeing a collapse in home prices. In fact, in certain areas, we're seeing just the opposite. And it's super interesting that some of these numbers kind of indicate that we're seeing a stabilizing of the market. And much of this is really dependent on how the interest rates go. If we see interest rates climb to 10% by the end of the year, I think it's very likely that home prices will not go up in the spring of 2022. But if interest rates stabilize right there at about 7 or 8%, I think that the home values will increase again in the spring of 2023. It's certainly very hard to tell. It's not really a good idea to try to predict what's going to happen in the housing market in the future. I'm probably wrong, so don't take my word for it. But I think these are kind of the trends that we're seeing overall in the housing market. We're not seeing a collapse. We're not seeing a housing market crash. We are seeing a slowdown. And I think in the winter, it is very normal for the housing market to kind of have that slowdown. So I think it's most likely what we'll see is that the housing market picks back up in the spring of 2023. Hey, thanks so much for staying to the end of the video. I do have something for you at the bottom of the description of this video. I've put a PDF so that you can download all of the numbers that we talked about in this video. All of the numbers are right there spelled out, super easy to read. Of course, if you have any questions about it, you literally can call or text me, and I'm happy to discuss some of the numbers that we've talked about today in the video. Of course, if you're wanting to know more about what it's like to live in Atlanta, click on this video. I'll see you there.